Yeah.
To the counties, obviously, to go to different boats, if you want to call it that. Which so how many applications did you have for your lifeboat grants? I mean, I'm trying to get a feeling of the need. I talked to, I have indications because I talk to businesses all the time, but you have a better picture of all the businesses and all the applications and what their needs were. I think you limited it at $10,000 too, if I recall correctly. So I'd like to hear more from you about not only the process, but the actual applications and types of businesses.
Well, first of all, we advertise this as the lifeboat grant, meaning that and we wrote right on there, the intent is to help entities that are running out of reserves, to try to, bridge them till things improve. So because of that, there were a lot of businesses that said, well, I don't want to go through this whole process if, I have 6 months of reserves and you're going to give it to entities that only have 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, or 3 months. So just from that, the number of businesses that applied was reduced. And I kind of, if we do this again, I don't think we'll name it the lifeboat grant. I think we'll name it something else, just because we really want to look at, other indicators, how much they have been reduced. They've reduced their revenues and also number of employees. And of course, it's also open to nonprofits. With the Working Washington grant, we received over 900 applications, but a lot of those were kind of garbage. Some were from other counties, some came in blank and had to reprocess them, and we had 620 in total. This time around, and then 48 of those businesses actually received funding. This time around, the end result is we have 107 that have quote unquote qualified. We had to eliminate businesses that weren't current on their L&I, which were over 130 businesses that were not currently current on L&I according to the L&I website. So anyway, we had to eliminate a lot of those. So the bottom line is, those that qualified, we're looking at 107 that have qualified to be evaluated by the grant selection committee.
In other words, to answer it simply, there's still a heck of a lot more demand than what we have funding for. So
yeah, and what we've decided is that the grant selection committee decided to do 15 $10,000 awards, and then if you're a sole proprietor or it's a husband and wife team, up to 2,500, and then 10 $5,000 awards, I think, and then we're also for the next round of funding, which we're getting out of the $20 million that the governor has announced for small businesses. They have given our county $145,000, which again, I'm really frustrated with that distribution. Jefferson County, that has only 40% of the population that we do, and all those same indicators, they're getting 125,000. So they keep on doing this threshold amount for counties, regardless of population, like Garfield, that has just over 2,000 people in their county, and they get this threshold amount, and then, which means there's not that much funding remaining. So that 145,000 is coming here shortly, and we'll process that, but it cannot go for any payroll. And they've come up with some pretty strict rules on how it can be distributed. And that we'll do that later this month. We'll advertise that, and we're going to try to make sure, because there were only, I think, 12 businesses from out west out of the 107 that applied. We're trying to get, and because we have a mandate from the state to ensure that we're reaching out to the most underserved and have a lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we're, really going to be making some phone calls and such to businesses that were on the West End that applied previously. And also Commissioner Peach said he would pay for an ad in the Forks Forum to get more businesses on the West End applying. But a discussion point has been that we cannot use minority status or women-owned status as a qualifier or an increase in number of points to grade these applications because of I think it was called Proposition 200, that tried to eliminate the affirmative action, and it did not pass. And so you cannot use that as a indicator, or you can't affirmatively give more value to an applicant that is woman-owned or minority-owned. They want us to report it. They want us to do a lot of outreach, and we will, and we have to submit the plan to them, how we're going to do that outreach, but we can't give more points to minority-owned businesses. And the other thing that they mentioned is that the tribes, our 4 tribes in our county, have received many times more in CARES Act funding than the county and the state have received, the county and the cities have received. So if those tribal-owned businesses need help, they really, we're being told to suggest that they go to their council because they've gotten so much more money, $8 billion from the CARES Act to the 564 tribes, which averages $14 million per tribe. And then plus tribes have received $30 million from the state dollars. So, which is obviously dwarfs, and there's 29 tribes in our state. So that's, over $1 million per tribe. And so, my conversations with Ron Allen too were saying, he was shocked at how little our county and cities have received in comparison to what tribal governments have received.
And again, thank you. The reason I said that is every time I have a discussion with Commerce, it seems like, we are going to reallocate more money directly out to the counties, and if you ratioed what would happen from before, what happened, it means Clallam County should receive someplace around $2.5 to $3.5 million, probably $3 million right in there. And obviously part of that should also, in my mind, certainly go back out to businesses. So I just was trying to get an idea of what kind of business, shortfall are we looking at? Obviously, if I just took your 10,000 times 107, that'd be over $1 million right there, before you even got started. But I mean, that gives me a lot better picture of where we are. And obviously, it all could go for rent relief, or we still have the whole daycare issue, and we have all the other issues that, go on. So certainly help with the food banks, whatever, and that's a whole different issue. But I was just trying to understand, certainly on the business side, so we could hopefully allocate more funds out to the business community, because we certainly need the businesses to be there when we come out of this pandemic. So
I'd like to add that I have a list of every single childcare business in our county, and we emailed those businesses. And of those businesses, that there's 35 that either have centers or are in-home care businesses. And we had 11 that applied. And some have said, well, we got funding from the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And so, we're good. but it's been, and we've got the folks that have worked in the childcare training industry reaching out to them. And I'm just kind of surprised that they aren't more responsive, with the application. The application did end up being more complicated than I had initially anticipated, but that was due to, my work with Mark, where he wanted to ensure that we were meeting the mandates of the Coronavirus Relief Fund, Treasury and state guidance. So and something we're doing that I'm excited about is that in our virtual job fair on August 13th, we will have a booth that Charlie's going to set up. I will, and I wrote somebody else in, I can't remember who it is right now, but we are going to have a booth for childcare. So we have the list of our childcare providers so that if a job seeker needs that, or the big thing, and working with Center for Inclusive Entrepreneurship, we're going to be sharing with people that, hey, if you have a proclivity, first off, to be a childcare provider, there is a big need in this space, and you could create your own childcare business, and here's how you do it, here are the resources. And so we'll be trying to hit the childcare areas as well. And then also Mike Rykoff with SBDC and CIE, they'll have a booth for helping people to, business owners, et cetera, individuals that are looking at starting up businesses. So anyway.
No, thank you. I mean, all that information is really helpful to me. And by the way, I mean, if you think about the childcare model or any model as a new business or a business, by the time you have, distancing, PPE requirements, everything else, what is the real model? And I can just tell you from wearing my YMCA board member hat, you look at the dollars in, dollars out, it doesn't pay for itself, basically, to keep it affordable for the people that need it, at least not the models I've seen so far. So, I mean, there are a lot of unknowns, and it makes it difficult for anyone, let alone, what businesses are going to start up, and when are they going to start up? And, oh, wait, we're not going to get to phase 3. So, all those things.
And also having 9 children in your home after you've gone through all the expensive process of getting trained and, ensuring that it's safe and all that kind of thing, that's a tall hurdle. But I'm also hearing that a lot more funding is going to be going to subsidize childcare in the future. So, they have to make the model sustainable, or the rest of a large portion of the economy can't chug along like it needs to.
Well, and the other issue, of course, are what the school's going to do. Are they going to open, run full time, or 2 days on, 2 days off, or whatever? And that, of course, affects the whole childcare issue too. So, I mean, a lot of unknowns is what I'd tell you. And then final comment, obviously every day's a new day when you look at it. I just want to let the people that are here today know that despite this pandemic, and you look at the finances of the county, it helps remind me why it is we keep reserves. I mean, this year we're going to certainly go through $3.5 million, but we started the year out with something on the order of $15.5 million. So, just for that. So, and I'll be quite honest, and I'll be happy to hear from Josh here shortly, but it rolls downhill from the state to the counties, and that's going to be next year next year and the year after, probably, when it's going to start happening. So we'll probably go through some additional reserves before we get there, I would imagine. So anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. So, Josh, can you give us any update? We haven't prepared this open forum. You can say pass, but.
No, I mean, I think that. Good morning, everybody. The big thing right now is the results from the primary election, and there's
real quick, will you introduce yourself? I don't know
that sorry.
Recognizes.
I apologize. Josh Weiss, I'm with Gordon Thomas Honeywell Government Affairs, and we've been representing NOLA since last fall. And I've been on a number of these calls since then. So good to see everyone. So yeah, the primary election results are kind of the big thing, and not a whole lot of excitement, frankly, in Colleen County. I mean, Commissioner Johnson lost somehow 3% of the vote. I'm not quite sure how he only garnered 97% of the vote, but nice job, Commissioner. All of your legislators or incumbent legislators are pulling through in the primary with very strong results. I think the big thing from my perspective on the primary is, a primary can be a very different election than a general election. I've been surprised in the past by how different the outcomes are. Really, the big effect right now is that you've got people that are getting winnowed out because we're a top 2 state. We think there probably are some trends in this that are interesting, though, that will probably carry through. The first, from my perspective, is it was not the blue tidal wave that we really all expected. There certainly were changes occurring, but really I think what we're seeing is more that blue parts of the state are getting bluer and red parts of the state are getting redder. And sort of the moderates in the legislature are continuing to have a harder time. I think our assessment right now is that at the most, probably the Democrats pick up 1 or 2 seats in the Senate, and probably in all likelihood will be pretty much even in the House, which is not a significant change when you really think about all the talk that they're talking about at the presidential level. When I said red getting redder in Whatcom County, 42nd District, we have a pretty weak results for a Democrat that just won last election cycle. That's a traditionally red district that's going back to being completely red. In the 19th district, which is down in Cowlitz County area, where you've traditionally had very moderate Democrats representing that area, we've got 2 moderate Democrats in Dean Tackle and Brian Blake that are both behind in the primary. That district lost a Democrat seat last election round to the Republicans. And so this could be potentially that whole district flipping over to Republican control. We also have, I would say, a couple of Democratic held seats where you've got moderate Democrats losing to more progressive challengers in the Democratic Party, and that would be the 5th district, which is Eastern King County, with Senator Mark Mullet is behind in that primary. And then in the 11th district, which is sort of South Seattle, Kent, Renton, Seattle area, and Zach Hudgens, who's I wouldn't say even a moderate Democrat, he's just not a liberal Democrat, losing to a progressive. So that's kind of how it's looking right now. What we're seeing, obviously this could all change. We still got ballots coming in, but that's what we see at the legislative level. I'm sure you all have seen the sort of statewide races. Not, from my perspective, any huge surprises there. Randy, I'm not sure what you were hoping for in terms of update. We're still thinking legislatively there won't be a special session this year. We're really, I think you're right about the budget. State budget outlook is very bleak. I do believe that county programs and local government programs are going to be under pressure. It's going to be very hard to make any additions. The one exception being the capital budget. They should have capital projects this next year. Was there anything specifically you wanted me to talk about on that?
No, I was just, I just know when the state suddenly has a great big budget deficit, it's very easy to, those things called unfunded mandates just keep rolling right down, and oh, well, gee, you county, you get to pay for it, and all the citizens they're in, right? So too bad, so sad, and here we go. And I just can see that coming. I don't know how bad it's going to be, but it's not going to be good, I'm sure of that.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I was surprised yesterday on a call with county administrators from across the state. They were giving kind of a rundown on county budgets, and um, counties were coming in saying, you know, we were projecting a 25% sales tax revenue decrease. We're only seeing a 5% sales tax revenue decrease. A number of counties were even. There were even a couple of counties that were in the positive. I have a couple city clients that are actually doing better sales tax wise this year than last year. So I wonder if that will translate to the state budget. I do think that perhaps the forecast won't be necessarily as bad in this, the reality won't necessarily be as bad as the forecast when collections continue to come in. But then again, as we go through second, third, and fourth waves of this, you know, just what will the long-term impacts be? We just don't know. So happy to answer questions.
I was on a call last Friday with Congressman Kilmer's staff, Sarah, Evan, and Mary Jane. And I was sharing with them the fact that, you know, there's still about 1.3 billion that the state is holding on to of the coronavirus relief funds. They were not aware of that. And I sent them the letter that was from the Washington State Association of Counties and the Association of Washington Cities. And so they followed up and said that Congressman Kilmer did have a call with the governor and asked him to release more of those funds, and that his plan is, according to that update, the plan he has is to put more of the funds towards the counties that have been most hit by the coronavirus, you know, Yakima, et cetera, those counties, and that he's kind of got a wait and see approach, even though if it's spent by the state, it has to be spent by December 30th. If he does allocate it down to the counties, it has to be spent by October 30th or 31st. And so there was not a strong response about, yes, here's funding that will get to the cities and the counties for their use and their distribution to local entities. So, but it was surprising to me that they weren't aware of that going on. I think that's part of a kind of a lack of information circulation if you're not, you know, if there isn't a special session or people aren't meeting. And I did see that Oregon's governor did announce they will have a special session beginning August 10th. So, and you know, one of our last of these coffees, when we had the 3 legislators on, all 3 of them said that they would like to go have a special session, and we're disappointed in that it's not happening. I see Lindsay from the city of Port Angeles is on with us. Lindsay, do you want to give any update? I know I haven't given you any any notice that might happen, but you know, if you want to, I'd love to hear what the city of Port Angeles is working on.
Sure, that's fine. No worries. I was just having breakfast and enjoying some coffee, listening to this great update. So last night we had a city council meeting. One of the things we approved was continuing to put more funds into mortgage relief, rental relief, utility assistance, deferring late payments on utilities. We have kind of all the fees that we can figure out how to waive for businesses. We've done that as well. And the overall concept there, I think, is that the more that we can keep businesses afloat and households afloat during the pandemic, the easier it's going to be for people to bounce back afterwards, so to speak. That if people start losing housing or their businesses have to close and they have to go through all the startup costs of that, it's going to be a lot harder to come back. So, you know, I think we talked about, well, it's $12,000 a month, and lost interest payments from utilities. But in my mind, based on what I've seen about the cost to governments from homelessness, that's just one person being homeless. So, it's the same situation, sounds like the county's in, which makes a lot of sense, that we have reserves. We've been fiscally prudent over the last 6 or so years. And now's the time to spend down those reserves, recognizing that the city's fiscal health is tied to the community's fiscal health. So that's kind of our overall framework. It does create the challenge of how much do you draw down your city reserves to try to keep other people afloat. But I think we have to look at this as we're all in this together. So I'm happy to hear too, it sounds like the county is working with the city on collaborating on some of that rental, mortgage, utility relief. And so one thing that we've been talking about is trying to keep the means testing, enough that, there's not fraud going on, but at the same time, keep it simple so that people can access those funds and get those funds out. This is, I don't think, the time for us to be really, really narrow and difficult with how somebody can access funds and making sure that they prove this and prove that. Let's recognize that a lot of people are in fiscal distress, and that's going to get a lot worse now without the $600 a month in utilities or in federal unemployment assistance. Let's see, I think there was one other thing I wanted to comment on. Oh yeah, so in terms of the city's own budget, I think we are looking at kind of more the not as serious of a shortfall. It is serious in that I think the paper reported around 140, 150 thousand. You know what? I'm not remembering the numbers accurately right now. But I think the take home for us is we did not hire a bunch of new staff during the last 6 or so years when sales tax is just increasing year over year. And so now that we're kind of looking at some cuts, we don't have to cut as seriously. So hopefully it's not as bad for the city as an entity, which in many ways means, are we going to look at laying off city employees in the next couple of years? For the next year, that doesn't look like it's an issue. Obviously, year after that is going to be a little too far down to project. So I think that's what I've got. I'm happy to take any questions, or if there's something that would be good to report on, happy to do that as well.
Great. Thank you so much for that update. Many of you probably are aware of this, but the state has allocated $100 million for rental relief. So there will be that process for people that, for residential rental payments, there will be an upcoming program. Commerce has been really slow to roll things out though through this process. And they did produce a plan and asked for public comment, and the group that has been working together, the cities and the county, on CDBG funds, Community Development Block Grants, we all worked with Cherish Cornish from OLICAP, and who's an attorney, and Rod Fleck was really good about recognizing the fact that their program did not allow for someone who lives in a mobile home park, manufactured park, trailer park to be able to get any rent relief. It was only if you were renting an apartment or a house. And so we made that comment that, if you are in there's no ground lease rental relief. So I don't know if they've modified their plan there, but again, there's going to be $100 million available for people that currently were at 50% of area median income. So, and then there were a lot of questions about how do you figure that out? But if people are getting the $600 per week, then they're higher than 2019 area median income. So it was really kind of confusing to figure out how would that apply, but there has been a lot of money allocated for that. So that will be a resource as well for people in Clallam County to receive those funds. And we'll get information out when they come out with more details, and hopefully it'll be fairly simple. And they said there would not be it would be primarily for people on Social Security and that kind of thing, but yeah.
Yeah, so that is I think that's the grant for trying to help people who are back due on their rent payments. And, I've been in kind of weekly calls that Ted Kellor, who's the housing director for Commerce, has been in and given updates. And, he says, yeah, it's a lot of money, but it's not enough to meet the needs statewide.
Right.
So
Right.
That's, I think, the big thing is we're throwing a lot of money at this, but the issue is huge. So at this point, folks probably know that the eviction moratorium ends on October 15th. Currently, there's a requirement from the governor that landlord offers a reasonable repayment plan to a tenant before taking action to evict them. That provision, my understanding, based on a Northwest Justice Project attorney's presentation, that also ends on October 15th, which doesn't make any sense. So there's going to be some kind of proclamation extending some part of the landlord-tenant relationship under the pandemic, at least that reasonable accommodation or reasonable repayment plan. But at this point, all of that ends on the 15th. The governor did set up a task force or kind of advisory group, which I've heard includes people who are claiming that the eviction moratorium is a takings. So definitely some opponents there of the eviction moratorium. So I don't know if, anyone with a crystal ball is able to say if the eviction moratorium is going to go past October 15th. But then that reasonable repayment system, assuming that goes forward, that raises a lot of questions of, well, what is reasonable? What about a tenant who doesn't have any income? Are they, a reasonable repayment plan for them is zero, but does that mean the landlord has no remedy? It creates a lot of challenges. So hopefully the state looks at some kind of comprehensive system for relief for the landlords as well as the tenants, because we have a lot of landlords in this town, or in Clallam County in general, who are living paycheck to paycheck as well, and sometimes their paycheck is that rent payment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. I was talking to one person that owns a triplex, and it's a duplex and then an ADU, and that is their primary source of income, and they maintain it. They were semi-retired, and their two tenants aren't paying rent, and so they moved out so that they could rent the unit they were in that was the nicest. So they had some income, and now they're sleeping on someone's couch. So, and they're looking for work. So it's, it can be it's not always that the landlord is this wealthy entity that can absorb the loss of income. And we have, and we've got a lot of investors, of course, that are retirees that have, that own smaller units or one home, that kind of thing. But the FDIC did put out to all banks that they should restructure debt and not call that restructuring a troubled debt restructuring. A TDR is what it's referred to as. And because that, if a bank reports that you had a TDR, troubled debt restructuring, then that's a huge hit on your credit score. And so this is, there are some things you can do with the bank what they'll do is just extend the mortgage period at the back end and delay payments. I think, I don't remember, it was originally 6 months that the FDIC allowed banks to extend commercial loans for landlords. And I don't know if there's been any update for that, but I know that's being discussed and addressed as well.
Colleen, I'd like to change the subject a little bit.
Sure.
Looking toward the future, Randy and Lindsay, before all of this happened, and Colleen Robinson too, there was a lot of discussion about increasing the infrastructure in the county to establish more lots, to build affordable housing. You know, all this was going on before COVID-19. And what do you see as the ability of the city and the county to put together another interlocal agreement to extend the sewers out into the Eastern UGA? I have been in discussions with the city planners, with Eric. I've been in discussions with Rainier, who did a lot of research years ago out here. I've got neighbors whose septics are failing that have approached the county on attaching to the line. And after talking with Eric, it was noted in the previous interlocal agreement that there was supposed to be a committee set up to address these issues after the sewer was brought out to the Walmart stores, you know, when we did the big expansion. That committee had never met until Eric pulled it together on July 30th. We passed a tax, what was it, last year? And that was supposed to go into a fund for, you know, housing development. Can we start looking toward the future a little bit instead of having to recover from this? Because that would provide jobs as well if we can get some of that stuff rolling. And I just wondered what you guys' take on looking forward and going back to some of our original goals for 2020.
Be happy to jump in unless Randy wants to go first.
Go ahead, and I'll follow up. No problems.
Yeah, so last year or the year before, the county and the 3 cities in the county all signed and I'm blanking on the name of it, but it is the Plan for How We Plan. It's an agreement on the overall long-term planning process in Clallam County and the way that that works between the county and the cities. So one of the principles in there is that ultimately we're looking at the city limits being coterminous with the urban growth areas around the cities. So for our purposes in Port Angeles, that means that the city limit that's currently at Ennis Creek would extend out to Morse Creek where the urban growth area ends. In other words, we'd incorporate the eastern urban growth area. Another principle in that plan of how we plan is that the cities need to set standards for what development codes are going to look like in those unincorporated urban growth areas, so that when we get toward that level or toward annexation, you know, it's already kind of developed up at what we'd expect for the city. So I think our fault in the city is not having established those standards. I believe that we haven't in the unincorporated Port Angeles urban growth area. So that's I think our bad. And then, you know, within that conversation, then if we did that, I think it would be up to the county to say, okay, well, how are you going to make this happen in this this urban growth area that's unincorporated? But if the city doesn't say this is what we expect, I don't think there's any onus on the county. I do think the failing septics are going to be the catalyst for people out in the urban growth area, the unincorporated UGA, to say, hey, we want to annex, we want to get on city utilities, rather than pay the big cost of repairing failed septics. That's kind of my thought. I'd be happy to be part of that process. Been thinking about that issue and wanting to understand, you know, how the sewer ran out to Walmart but didn't service everybody in between.
and I can't answer that. Obviously Lindsay's talking about Port Angeles area. You know, it's a pretty complex thing because if you're outside the SQUIM, it's a little bit different. And if you develop all the in-holdings in SQUIM, I think their forecast is by 2060 or something, they would be fully developed. And obviously, if you're outside and you're held to the same standards as in the city, then there's an issue because am I going to wait until 2060 to develop my property? Or if I develop it according to city standards with the same kind of density you're talking about, but I don't have the infrastructure there, then I have a problem. You know, I'm just telling you, Lindsay, so it depends where you are in the county and what you're looking at. It's not one simple thing, and you have to look at each area is what I guess I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, I thought the question was about the eastern urban growth area east of Port Angeles. So if I missed it,
and I was wearing kind of a more global area. What I would tell you also we are looking at, which is really important, is the 1406 funding that came in, which is obviously develop, quote, affordable housing. Where to use it, my pet peeve, and it's an issue certainly the counties have relative to prevailing wage for rural areas. Because I think people have heard me say before, you get about 50% of what you would otherwise be able to afford if you did it through private builders. So that's an issue. But back to the more grand issue in the county, from the county, and I'm just speaking as one commissioner, there are two others. So you've got to understand, I don't know exactly where the others would be, but from my standpoint, where to put those funds to get the greatest benefit for affordable housing in the county, I don't have an answer for that. It could be, obviously, we have one area in Carlsberg and we've got sewer over there. It could be in the city of Port Angeles and on the west end or the east end that makes more sense, or it could be someplace else. I do not know that. We need to sit down and actually plan what could be developed, what infrastructure would help develop, you know, that affordable housing we're looking at. And again, that's not been, you know, sequenced as to what that should be. That's part A. Part B, I looked at the funding because I can't remember from the county standpoint, it's about $100,000 a year, plus and minus. And I had looked at it because it's over 20 years thinking, well, you could bond that, amortize it, and put $2 million so you'd actually get enough together in one lump to actually accomplish something. Good luck going to the bond markets right now. It's not going to happen. So, you know, that money's not going away, so don't misunderstand that. But again, from my standpoint, the financing part of it kind of is one alternative has been delayed at least for a year or two, I think, before we go there. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't plan and figure out an allocation of where that should go. I know our DCD director was thinking the Carlsberg area, and I know we just recently made an investment out in Carlsberg, and just so everyone knows, some of the zoning in that area is 6 to 10 per acre. So, you know, again, you have water, or should have water after with the deep well, as well as having sewer out there. But again, I'm really don't care from my perspective. I'm looking at affordable housing. Where can we get the best benefit in the county? And I really mean that. I don't really care where it happens to go. It needs to make the most sense for all of us. So, anyway. Don't know if that answered your question, and maybe I wasn't trying to favor your area or not. I just don't know if that's the area that makes most sense, Debbie. So, well,
the frustrating thing, Randy, that I've run into in the last 6 months, and I just stumbled back into this. You know that my husband and I started a replat of the property that we owned back in 2007. And we were, you know, we went through the process. We were given, okay, these are the conditions that you have to have in order to downsize the half-acre lots. Out here, I can have 15 units on this 1 acre parcel that I own. Okay, so we started that process. Of course, the economic downturn of 2008, everybody just kind of, you know, put everything on hold. I happened to walk into the county to ask about getting a permit to re-roof my carport and my shop, and heard a partial conversation. Sorry, I was eavesdropping, but DNR, who had bought the old armory over on McCarver, was having a meeting with the economic, or with the DCD group about bringing the sewer from Slate down to the Armory. And I go, wait a minute, that it would make more sense to bring it down Kemp like we proposed back then than down there. I said, why didn't somebody, put two and two together? Okay, so I got involved with that conversation a little bit. They had their meeting. They proposed what they want to do. Then I talked to my realtor, and he told me that I have 3 neighbors whose septics have failed, and one lady has no ground in order to put in a biofilter. So they had contacted RJ Services to put together a bid to connect 3 houses to the sewer. And so it was just kind of like, wait a minute, let's back up here, because Rainier Mill had done a lot of surveying. They proposed things, all this kind of stuff, and they're willing. I've talked to them. They're willing to jump back on board. So we could maybe have private funding to bring this all the way down Kemp, so Rainier can attach coming from their dump. I mean, I'm trying to look at the big picture to see how many more we can serve out here, but trying to get the city and the county to talk to each other and set the standards, like you said, Lindsay, for what we have to do to develop it has been the frustration. Not maybe so much the money, but if we were able to put it together privately and just do a reimbursement agreement, but we still have to have the standards that are expected from the city and the county in order to do that. So that was my reason for bringing it up. Sorry.
Donna,
I'll have to talk
this
to you
is
guys.
Debbie, this is Colleen, and I'll
Yeah.
just jump in with a couple of things. For Habitat, it doesn't pencil out to build where we have to put in a septic. We just can't. To add that to the cost of building a new home just doesn't pencil out for us at this time. So we typically build within the cities. The other reason we build within city limits is due to transportation. Some of our families don't have cars, so it's important that they are near and around bus lines. I'll share a couple of updates that most of you probably know the Wells Fargo branch in Port Angeles is closing as of October. I don't know if that's news to anyone. However, Wells Fargo and Habitat International have had a partnership for many years. And Wells Fargo has recently gifted money to Habitat to disperse to affiliates. And that disbursement was for new construction, and Habitat Clallam received $15,000 towards one of our new builds from Wells Fargo. So that's pretty exciting. Also wanted to share with you that Interfor Lumber, for the second time, has donated all of the framing lumber for the 2 homes that we're building right now. That's probably a $16,000 to $18,000 savings and a gift in kind to Habitat for the 2 houses that we're building right now. So appreciative of Interfor Lumber and that donation. They have a new mill manager. His name is Dave Lowry. Great guy, came to our wall raising. And then lastly, had a conversation with my construction manager yesterday. We source most of our materials through Lumber Traders, Angeles Millwork, and our sales rep there informed our construction manager that sheets of OSB have gone up $10 a sheet in the last month. And they anticipate another $5 a sheet, so up $15 within the next 2 months. That's a serious hit to our materials costs to have sheets of OSB go up by that much. And it's basically about supply and demand. People are building because of COVID and the pandemic. Processing plants were shut down. And so now our costs have significantly increased. We use OSB for the decking, for the roofing, for all of the sheeting on the outside of the house. And to have it be $15 more per sheet is quite a hit to our budget. So we're still building 2 houses. We have enough property at Maloney Heights to build 4 more after this. And then basically we're out of land. We have funding that we can access to buy land. We just can't find land affordable enough that if we purchase it, it would pencil out to keep the house affordable. So we continue to fight the good fight here. We haven't built in Sequim since 2009. Port Angeles, we're still building, and in Forks, The Housing Authority bought our last 6 lots at Maloney Lane, and those houses are ready to start probably sometime in August. They're going to be breaking ground and building those 6 affordable houses out in Forks. Thanks. I think we're right at 9:01. Sorry, Colleen.
Colleen Robinson, I was out on the job site when Paul was telling me about that, because he says, before you lay any of that flooring, go up into the scrap pile from the other house and see if there's anything that'll fit before you cut that full sheet.
Yeah, that's a big hit to our budget.
So thank you everyone for joining us. I don't have everybody's email address that pops up here, but I haven't been able to link that unemployment aggregated data. So I will email it out to you right now. And just wanted to also let you know that our website is going to be down for 24 hours, the Choose Clallam First, and I think also Peggy confirmed clallam.org, because we're moving from GoDaddy to a WordPress platform that'll be a lot easier for us to manage. But anyway, and so I think we'll have a better product in the end, but yeah, it'll be down for about 24 hours. And I will email everyone that aggregated data spreadsheet right now, and that also has information by what NAICS code. It doesn't aggregate it down, the unemployment applicants down like NAICS code by city, but it does NAICS code for the whole county and what portion were the cities, where Port Angeles, the Port Angeles address area, it's not city limits, but address area has a higher share of unemployed people than the other areas did, Sequim or the West End. So you'll see how I laid that out, but happy to share that. And that's about it. That's about all we got. Yes, Lena.
Can I just make one comment? One of the things that I'm really concerned about, and we briefed on it earlier, is as that unemployment has run out, I'm highly concerned about what's going to happen with our local businesses. So at the outset of the conversation, we talked about what the funding needs were for businesses. And I'm really worried about the coming months, because our local citizens won't be having that extra unemployment, or we don't know what that's going to look like yet. And so just keeping that in mind as funding needs come up or availability comes up, is I'm really concerned about what's going to happen with our businesses going forward.
Which also, of course, means sales taxes for cities and counties. That will be hit. So, yeah, as well. You're right, and it'll be interesting to see, because if, 8,000 out of the 28,000, or 28% of our population has received unemployment, then, which includes that $600 per week, that I really think they will replace it, but there is the potential that it would take a while, and so there will be a gap period where people generally would not be spending as much money as they had previously. So thank you, everyone, and I'm about to push send on this email, and I hope everyone enjoys their day and have a good rest of the week. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.